Okay, we're going to start by tying the tail of this feather game changer. This is an olive themed fly, so I'm going to start with a tuft to olive marabou. There's just one marabou feather pinched together here at the tips. The size of this you'll just probably have to get a feel for as you tie it, because this is going to be a big fly. It's, you know, probably 5 to 6 inches long. So I'm trying to get a solid inch to inch and a half of length in this marabou tail. So I'm going to tie that in first. Right at the end of this is the 10 millimeter fish skull shank to start with. So I'm going to tie that in. Just a couple of pinch wraps to get it right on top, and then tighten it down, wrap back so we can extend our room on this shank. We got quite a bit to put on this little short shank. Some people will just tie the tail on this first shank. I like to put one turn of the hen feathers on it as well, so I'm going to fit quite a bit on here. So now that I got the marabou in, I'm going to take the olive Palmer chenille. Let me just cut a workable section of this, and I'm just going to put this in at full length on the tail section, and just a couple of wraps just to get a little bit of flash mixed in with this marabou. So I'm going to tie that in real fast, and then just give this a couple of wraps. There's 1 and 2. I'm not really moving forward at all. I'm putting them right at the base of that marabou. So there's my 2 wraps. I'll tie it off. 3 turns usually locks that in, and then I pull everything back and I kind of wrap over it a little bit, just kind of catching, I don't know if you can see it, just catching the cord, the braid that holds the chenille together. I kind of just wrap over that to pinch it down, and then snip that off. And then you could just do that and wrap feathers. That would look, you know, start wrapping your hen feathers. So I'm going to grab 4 feathers. These are actually bigger feathers. I can use them for other things because we're just cutting the tips off. This is a little quarter dry fly saddle that I'm using just because that's what I have close. So I'll start with your side, and what I'm going to do is basically on the 4 sides I'm going to tie this hackle tip in, and just about the length of the marabou, you know, pretty close. So just kind of put it where you want it, hold it down, give it 1 loose wrap, 2 loose wraps, and then pull back towards you. That's usually the best way to keep it straight. We'll see if that worked for me. It did kind of splay a little bit. We're going to put 4 of these in, so I'm not super worried about the exact alignment here. Trying to minimize twist a little bit so you get some coverage, but I'm not overly concerned with it being perfect. So now I'm on the top. I've got 1 wrap, 2 wraps, pull down, and you're really just kind of looking to get good coverage all the way around the shank. So like I said, you could probably do up to like 6 feathers here. Would be probably how, you know, a lot of the guys will tie it, but this I think gives you the effect, gives you a little bit of the grizzly modeling in the tail, and kind of accents that flash, but still lets the flash shine through. You lose some of that flash if you're covering the whole thing with hackle tips. So now I'm just going to do the bottom, and then we'll call that good. Tie that in real fast. 1 wrap, 2, pull tight, and then just wrap this back so that the tie-in point is the same for all 4 tips, and then I can cut these off. I'll actually wrap forward a little bit just to lock these in. So then I've got my, this is a whiting silver grade American hen hackle saddle. The feathers, it's got a lot of good feathers on them. The Met's Magnum hen, if you can find them, is really what you're looking for. But I'm doing this video with the whiting because you can get some really cool color combinations. So this is a black laced white that's dyed olive, meaning it was a white feather with black tips that they dyed this olive color. So it's gonna, I'm hoping it's gonna have a pretty cool effect, wrapped on game changer style. So what we're doing is I've pulled 3 of the smallest feathers I can find off that saddle. And if you're not familiar with the concept, I guess I should probably get into that. As we move up in these shanks and hooks, you're gonna slowly move, I don't know if you consider that up or down your saddle, but you're gonna start with the small feathers down here, and you're gonna gradually move up to the real large feathers on the head of your fly. So you get a nice built-in tapered fly. And you're gonna grab 3 to 4 feathers typically at a time. So in this back one, I'm gonna have 3 feathers, and I'm just gonna tie those in. And I usually like to not have to do 2 bunches on this back. So what you'll find is on the longer shanks, you'll have to tie in 1 bunch, wrap it, tie it off, and then start with a new bunch just to cover the length of the shank. The back ones I try not to do. You can see I'm not worrying about being super tidy here. I just kind of wrapped the tips back and wrapped over them as opposed to cutting them off. I'll go to the front because I'm hoping this is going to cover. I've got this shank pretty thick and these are real small feathers, so I might not have enough wraps with these feathers, but we'll give it a shot. So then you just want to palmer these forward. You want to trap as few of the feathers as possible. You can brush them out a little bit if you do get them trapped, but for the most part this fly is going to swim a lot better and look a lot better if you can trap as few feathers as possible in this wrapping. I don't mind getting a little bit of the like marabou fluff at the head, so you'll see I'm going to kind of get into that on here. A little bit of the fluffiness, but I think that adds some movement and stuff. It maybe doesn't look as good as if you had enough of the regular barbels to get all the way to the front, but that marabou fluff moves really good in the water too. So I'll capture that with a couple good wraps, and then I'm gonna go ahead and get a few good wraps in front, do a whip finish. It's a 5-turn whip finish there. You can do, we're gonna glue it, so you don't really need to go that crazy, but just have it. Cut that off. Cut off your feathers, making sure you don't cut off anything too much. And there's the tail. So now we're ready for our next shank. Well, I'll put some super glue on here and then we're ready for our next shank. Pretty much going to go through this. I probably won't talk too much through the rest of the video until we get to the head. The head's going to break the pattern just slightly, but basically going to follow this pattern of new shank and then a few wraps right at the back of the new shank with palmer chenille, and then tapering forward with feathers. As I get to the shanks that are just basically palmer chenille and feathers, that's when I'll do 4 feathers at a time, because you want it to be pretty thick like this. in a while as I move up the length of this. If you take a comb or something and kind of brush out, try to untrap whatever fibers you can. It's a little easier to go, do this as you go, as opposed to trying to sneak in there after you're done. Probably the best method for this. You'll see a lot of guys are using the shanks to actually attach. So you'd thread a 15 or 20 millimeter shank through here, and then put that on the side of the hook and tie it in. So there's just a different way of doing it. Show you where I'm trying to get to on this. I'm trying to get the eye of the previous shank almost touching the last part of the straight part of the hook shank. So you want it to be like completely straight in line as much as possible. And I end up with just the smallest of loops at the end of this, and you'll still get plenty of motion. But again, my goal is to minimize the gap that I end up with so that I have a nice smooth transition between the sections. So then I'm going to double this over. So I've tied this down my side of the shank of the hook, and then I'm going to wrap this over to your side and grab it. And so you're kind of just trying to tie it in down the sides of the shank. Now we've got our tail, the two 10mm pieces, one of which is the tail, and then the B10S hook, and then we're going to have two 15mm shanks, and then our front hook. So we will move on to that next. So there's our hook. So what we have to do so that this fly, we can guarantee that this fly swims upright all the time. You know, it's gonna jerk back and forth and it's gonna wiggle, and because of all the articulation, but you want to, when you let it rest, you want it to, you know, be straight up and down. So this hook point riding straight down. And to do that, we add a keel. So this is 030, so I don't need a ton of wraps of this. It's pretty heavy lead-free wire. You know, just do like 5 or 6 wraps of this, just as low on the bend of the hook as you possibly can. You know, and that's more than enough there, because this is, like I said, pretty thick wire. Okay, so I went ahead and did the first section of feathers on the lead hook. I'm running out of battery on my camera. You've seen it on all the other sections. Did the same thing, just wrapped some Palmer chenille, you know, 5 good wraps at this point, and then wrapped my feathers forward to here. So I'm going to get a few more quick wraps of chenille, and then I'm going to tie in those hackle tips. So I want to get a length here, you know. I've got 2 feathers here, 1 for each side. You know, you usually want this to go back probably no farther than the tips of your first bunch of feathers on the head hook. So I'm going to go ahead and peel these. I think I'm pretty close to that. And then I'm going to tie in my first one. I'm going to try and do this kind of fast because of my battery situation, but so hopefully the results are okay and I don't run out of battery. Get this tied in on this side. That looks okay. And then same thing on this side. Make sure my length is comparable. Grab it and wrap it in there. And that looks about right. And a lot of times I'll wrap these down a little bit and then bend the waist piece back just to make sure they don't get pulled out. So I've got these Pro Sport Fisher imitation jungle cockeyes.